The people who laugh the loudest at your fall are rarely prepared for your return. The ballroom shimmered beneath thousands of crystal reflections. Golden light spilled across polished marble floors while servers moved silently through clusters of guests carrying silver trays filled with sparkling drinks. At the center of it all stood Ryan Brooks, smiling for cameras as flashes illuminated his face every few seconds. Tonight belonged to him. At least that was what everyone believed. The annual Excellence in Business Awards Gala had become one of the most prestigious events in the country. Billionaires, investors, media personalities, and industry leaders filled the massive hall overlooking downtown Chicago. Invitations were nearly impossible to obtain. Every table represented influence. Every conversation carried value. Every appearance mattered. Ryan adjusted the cuff of his tailored black tuxedo and accepted another congratulatory handshake. His company had experienced its most successful year yet. Revenue records, expansion projects, national recognition. Everything he spent years building had finally placed him exactly where he always wanted to be. Beside him stood Vanessa Quinn. Her silver gown caught the light with every movement. She smiled confidently whenever photographers approached, carefully positioning herself beside Ryan as though she had always belonged there. In many ways she believed she did. Several reporters gathered nearby. Questions flew toward Ryan. Future plans, market forecasts, industry predictions. Ryan answered each one smoothly. He had learned how to perform for audiences years ago. Success required confidence. Confidence attracted attention. Attention created opportunities. The formula had never failed him. Then Vanessa noticed something on a nearby guest list display. Her smile widened immediately. This is interesting. Ryan glanced toward her. What? Vanessa pointed discreetly. Look. Ryan followed her gaze. Names scrolled across the electronic display near the ballroom entrance. CEOs. Investors. Public figures. Then he saw it. Evelyn Carter. For a moment his expression froze. The name appeared ordinary enough. Yet seeing it, there felt strangely unexpected. 7 years had passed since the divorce. 7 years since she disappeared from his daily life. 7 years since he convinced himself she was simply part of an older chapter he no longer needed. Vanessa laughed softly. She actually accepted the invitation. Ryan continued staring at the screen. Apparently. I cannot believe she is coming. Vanessa folded her arms. Honestly, what does she even do now? Ryan looked away. I do not know. The answer bothered him more than he expected. He truly did not know. Somewhere after the divorce, Evelyn vanished from every social circle they once shared. No headlines. No public appearances. No professional updates. Nothing. It was as though she stepped out of one life and into another that nobody could see. Vanessa smirked. Maybe she wants everyone to remember she exists. Ryan offered a polite smile but said nothing. Deep down curiosity stirred. Not because he missed her. At least that was what he told himself. More because he wondered what became of someone after losing everything they helped build. Across the ballroom, conversations continued. Music drifted softly from a live orchestra positioned near the grand staircase. Guests arrived in waves. Luxury vehicles lined the street outside. Cameras flashed continuously. Every arrival generated fresh attention. Vanessa leaned closer. Do you think she is coming alone? Ryan took a sip from his drink. Probably. Vanessa laughed again. That is going to be awkward. Several nearby guests overheard the comment and exchanged amused glances. One woman lowered her voice. I remember her. Another nodded. She was married to Ryan before Vanessa. What happened to her? No idea. The conversation ended with casual shrugs. Forgotten. That was the word hanging invisibly beneath every comment. Forgotten. Ryan should have felt satisfied. Life had moved forward exactly as planned. He achieved everything he wanted. Yet hearing Evelyn discussed like a distant memory created an emotion he could not immediately identify. Before he could examine it further, another round of applause erupted near the stage. Event organizers announced the beginning of the evening's opening ceremony. Guests slowly moved toward their assigned tables. Ryan and Vanessa followed the crowd. Their table occupied a prime location near the front of the ballroom. Industry leaders greeted Ryan warmly as he passed. Several stopped to praise his recent achievements. Vanessa glowed beneath the attention. Everything unfolded exactly as expected, until a whisper began moving through the room. At first it appeared near the entrance. Then it spread from table to table. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Even some photographers redirected their cameras toward the grand doors. Ryan noticed immediately. What is happening? Vanessa looked toward the entrance. I do not know. More people turned. More voices lowered. Something had changed. The ballroom that moments earlier revolved entirely around Ryan Brooks now seemed focused elsewhere. Ryan slowly followed everyone's gaze toward the massive glass doors leading into the gala. Outside, beneath the glow of camera lights and city reflections, a long black limousine had just arrived. The driver stepped forward. The rear passenger door opened. And without realizing it, nearly every person inside the ballroom stopped watching the stage and started watching the entrance instead. The ballroom remained frozen in anticipation as cameras turned toward the entrance. Even the orchestra seemed quieter. Conversations dissolved into whispers. Every guest wanted to know who had suddenly captured the room's attention. Ryan Brooks watched alongside everyone else, one hand resting against the back of his chair while Vanessa leaned forward trying to see through the crowd. The limousine door remained open for several seconds. Then a woman stepped out. A ripple moved through the gathering almost instantly. Not loud, not dramatic, more like the collective realization that something unexpected had arrived. Evelyn Carter stood beneath the glow of the entrance lights. Her dark emerald gown flowed elegantly as she paused near the carpet leading toward the ballroom doors. The color contrasted beautifully against her fair skin. Her posture was calm. Her expression composed. She did not look nervous. She did not look eager for attention. She simply looked like someone completely comfortable occupying her own space. Ryan stared. For a moment he almost failed to recognize her. Not because she looked different. Because she looked exactly like the version of herself he never expected to see again. Confident. Self-assured. Entire. 7 years earlier after the divorce, Evelyn had left Chicago quietly. No dramatic announcements. No public statements. No social media campaigns designed to attract sympathy. She simply disappeared. Most people assumed her story ended there. They assumed she became one more forgotten chapter in Ryan Brooks's rise to success. Looking at her now, Ryan suddenly realized how little he actually knew about the years that followed. Vanessa folded her arms. Well, she said softly. She certainly cleaned up nicely. Ryan did not respond. His attention remained fixed on Evelyn. Memories arrived unexpectedly. Small details from another life. Early mornings in a cramped apartment. Shared meals between long workdays. The sound of Evelyn laughing while reviewing business plans spread across their kitchen table. Back then there had been no luxury. No awards. No magazine covers. Just ambition and belief. Most people only knew Ryan's success story from the point where cameras became interested. They never saw the beginning. They never saw Evelyn working beside him during those uncertain years. They never saw her proofreading presentations at midnight, managing finances when money was tight, encouraging him after failed investor meetings, sacrificing opportunities of her own because they could not afford two dreams at the same time. Those memories felt strangely distant now. Like photographs left too long in sunlight. Yet standing there at the entrance, Evelyn somehow brought them back. She acknowledged the photographers politely. Nothing more. No dramatic posing. No attempt to command attention. Ironically, that restraint seemed to attract even more interest. Several guests began whispering among themselves. Is that Ryan's ex-wife? I think so. She looks incredible. What happened to her after the divorce? Nobody seemed to have an answer. The mystery only increased. The fascination. Vanessa noticed the growing attention and shifted uncomfortably. Throughout the evening she had enjoyed being one of the most photographed women in the room. Suddenly cameras appeared far more interested in someone else. Meanwhile, Evelyn approached the ballroom entrance. Her heels clicked softly against polished stone. Every step appeared effortless. Every movement calm. Ryan felt an unfamiliar sensation settle into his chest. Regret was not exactly the right word. Neither was nostalgia. Perhaps it was simply awareness. Awareness that time had continued moving long after he stopped paying attention. Awareness that people continued growing even when they were no longer part of his story. The massive ballroom doors opened. Evelyn stepped inside. Conversation stalled again. More heads turned. Several industry leaders immediately recognized her. Not from her marriage. From her recent accomplishments. Though Ryan did not know that yet. All he knew was that people were looking at her with a level of respect he had not expected. One executive near the front stood up. Another smiled in recognition. A third raised his hand in greeting. Ryan frowned slightly. Something felt unusual. Vanessa noticed too. "Why are they acting like that?" she whispered. Ryan offered no answer. Because he did not have one. Evelyn acknowledged the greetings politely and continued walking. She looked neither impressed nor overwhelmed by the attention. If anything, she seemed entirely accustomed to it. The realization unsettled Ryan more than he wanted to admit. For years he imagined Evelyn living somewhere far from the world they once shared. Building a quiet life. Remaining safely distant from the success he achieved. Looking at her now, that assumption suddenly felt foolish. Then another movement near the entrance captured everyone's attention once more. A second figure emerged from the limousine. Taller. Broad-shouldered. Impeccably dressed in a tailored midnight black tuxedo. He stepped onto the carpet with calm confidence before offering his hand toward the doorway. Several guests immediately recognized him. A few visibly straightened in surprise. Others exchanged stunned glances. One executive nearly dropped the drink in his hand. The reaction spread faster than before. Much faster. Ryan watched the man step forward and join Evelyn near the center of the entrance hall. Their movements carried a natural familiarity. Comfortable. Effortless. The kind built through genuine partnership rather than public performance. Evelyn looked up at him and smiled softly. The man returned the smile. Around them, whispers multiplied throughout the ballroom. Names began circulating from table to table. Recognition spread. Shock followed close behind. Vanessa's expression changed first. Confusion. Then disbelief. Then something much closer to panic. Ryan felt his stomach tighten as he noticed several powerful CEOs suddenly rising from their seats. Not to greet him. Not to congratulate him. To greet the man standing beside Evelyn Carter. Ryan Brooks remained standing as more executives crossed the ballroom to greet the man beside Evelyn. Each handshake seemed to deepen the confusion growing inside him. He recognized some of the people leaving their tables. Founders whose companies dominated international markets. Investors capable of moving billions of dollars with a single decision. Men and women who rarely stood up for anyone. Yet one by one they approached Evelyn and her companion with unmistakable respect. Vanessa watched the scene unfold with growing discomfort. "Who is he?" she whispered. Ryan did not answer. He was trying to remember where he had seen the face before. The man looked familiar. Not personally familiar, but professionally familiar. Like a name attached to headlines he had read years ago. Near the ballroom entrance, Evelyn greeted each person with quiet confidence. Nothing about her behavior suggested she was trying to impress anyone. In fact, the opposite seemed true. She appeared entirely indifferent to the attention surrounding her. The man beside her maintained the same calm demeanor. He shook hands, smiled politely, exchanged brief conversations. Then his attention returned to Evelyn as though the rest of the room barely mattered. Ryan noticed that detail immediately. The contrast felt impossible to ignore. Years ago, whenever professional success arrived, it became the center of Ryan's world. Meetings came first. Opportunities came first. Recognition came first. Looking at the couple across the room, Ryan sensed something different. The attention followed them, yet neither seemed dependent on it. A familiar voice interrupted his thoughts. "You do not know who that is?" Ryan turned toward an older executive standing nearby. "Should I?" The man looked genuinely surprised. "That is Alexander Reed." The name landed with unexpected weight. Ryan stared across the ballroom again. Alexander Reed. Suddenly the memories connected. Business journals. Financial publications. International acquisitions. One of the most respected private investment groups in the world. Ryan felt his chest tighten slightly. Alexander Reed rarely attended public events. He almost never appeared in interviews. Yet within elite business circles, his reputation was legendary. Vanessa blinked rapidly. Alexander Reed? The executive nodded. The Alexander Reed. Silence settled around the table. Vanessa slowly turned toward Evelyn. The realization appeared to hit her all at once. Across the room stood the woman she expected to pity. The woman she assumed had faded into obscurity after the divorce. And standing beside her was one of the most influential businessmen in the country. Ryan looked back toward the stage where organizers were preparing for the next award presentation. The evening suddenly felt very different from the one he expected. 7 years earlier, when Evelyn left Chicago, most people assumed she had lost everything. Ryan remembered those months clearly. The divorce became a quiet topic among friends and colleagues. Some sympathized with Evelyn. Others simply moved on. Ryan moved on too. Or at least he convinced himself he had. Building his company consumed every available hour. Success arrived quickly after that. New opportunities. New partnerships. New recognition. Somewhere during those years he stopped asking what happened to Evelyn because the answer no longer seemed important. Looking at her now, he realized that assumption may have been the biggest mistake he ever made. The orchestra began another piece as guests returned to their seats. Alexander and Evelyn moved toward a reserved table near the front of the ballroom. Not beside Ryan's table. Not behind it. Directly in front of it. Even that detail felt strangely symbolic. Vanessa attempted a smile. Well, that is certainly unexpected. Ryan nodded absent-mindedly. His attention remained fixed on Evelyn. She laughed softly at something Alexander said. The expression looked familiar. Not because he remembered the exact moment. Because he remembered how she used to laugh before life became complicated. Before disappointment slowly replaced trust. A flashback surfaced unexpectedly. A tiny apartment. Rain tapping against the windows. Evelyn sitting cross-legged on the floor reviewing business projections, while eating takeout from paper containers. Back then neither of them had money. Neither of them had status. Yet she believed in him completely. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. He had spent years viewing the divorce as an unfortunate but necessary chapter. Something that happened on the way to bigger goals. Tonight those assumptions felt less certain. Near the stage, an event host welcomed guests and announced the upcoming award categories. Applause filled the room. Cameras returned to their positions. Yet Ryan noticed something interesting. The photographers continued glancing toward Evelyn and Alexander. Their arrival remained the most talked about development of the evening. Several guests even left their tables to introduce themselves. Vanessa noticed it too. Her smile grew tighter each time another influential figure approached them. Then something else happened. One of the largest digital screens positioned beside the stage displayed highlights featuring notable attendees. Photographs rotated across the screen accompanied by short biographies. Entrepreneurs. Innovators. Industry leaders. The audience watched politely. Then Evelyn's photograph appeared unexpectedly. Conversation stopped again. Ryan leaned forward. Beneath her image, a short introduction appeared. Founder and Chief Executive Officer of Carter Global Advisory. Strategic consultant to international investment firms. Recipient of multiple leadership awards. Advisor to emerging technology ventures. The room responded with immediate applause. Not polite applause. Genuine applause. Ryan stared at the screen. Every word felt like a revelation. Carter Global Advisory. He had heard the company name before. Several times. He simply never connected it to Evelyn. Across the ballroom, she accepted the recognition with a modest smile. Nothing more. No dramatic reaction. No attempt to enjoy the moment publicly. Alexander looked at her with obvious pride. Ryan slowly sat back in his chair. For the first time all evening, the noise around him seemed distant. Because the woman everyone thought had disappeared had not disappeared at all. While he spent years assuming her story ended, she had quietly written an entirely new one. The applause eventually faded, but the shift inside the ballroom remained. Ryan Brooks could feel it. For years he had learned how to read rooms. Investors revealed confidence through posture. Executives revealed uncertainty through silence. Opportunities often appeared before anyone spoke about them. Tonight the room was speaking loudly without using words at all. Attention had moved. Not completely. Not yet. But enough for Ryan to notice. Across the ballroom, Evelyn Carter sat beside Alexander Reed, while conversations formed around them naturally. Nobody seemed interested in forcing connections or exchanging business cards. People simply wanted to spend time near them. The distinction bothered Ryan more than he expected. Recognition was common. Respect was rare. And respect seemed to follow Evelyn wherever she went. The evening's next award presentation began. Large screens illuminated the stage while finalists appeared one by one. Cameras swept across the audience searching for reactions. Ryan maintained his professional smile. Vanessa mirrored it beside him. Yet neither could fully ignore what was happening around them. Every few minutes another influential guest stopped at Evelyn's table. Every few minutes another conversation ended with laughter. Genuine laughter. Comfortable laughter. The kind that could not be manufactured. Ryan watched quietly. Then something unexpected happened. A video presentation appeared on the main screens. The segment highlighted business leaders who had made significant contributions beyond financial success. Community investment. Mentorship programs. Educational initiatives. The audience watched attentively. Several familiar names appeared. Then Evelyn's face filled the screen once again. This time accompanied by photographs nobody in the ballroom had seen before. Images of scholarship programs. Small business workshops. Community development projects. Young entrepreneurs standing beside her at ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Nonprofit partnerships. Educational grants. The narrator's voice echoed through the hall. Over the last 5 years, Carter Global Advisory had funded dozens of entrepreneurship initiatives across underserved communities, while mentoring hundreds of first-generation business owners. The audience responded immediately with applause. Ryan blinked. He had known nothing about this. Not one article. Not one interview. Not one announcement. Yet somehow Evelyn had built an entire legacy quietly while he spent years building visibility. The realization settled heavily inside him. 7 years earlier, after signing the divorce papers, Evelyn had left with remarkably little compared to what they built together. Ryan remembered the conversation clearly. Attorneys. Negotiations. Documents spread across polished conference tables. Evelyn never fought aggressively for money. She never demanded headlines. She never attempted public revenge. At the time Ryan viewed that restraint as acceptance. Looking back now, he wondered whether it had actually been strength. Across the room, Evelyn appeared almost embarrassed by the attention. Alexander leaned toward her and said something that made her smile. The expression softened her face instantly. Ryan recognized that smile. Once years ago he had been the reason for it. Vanessa noticed his attention lingering. You have been staring at them for half the evening. Ryan looked away. I was watching the presentation. Vanessa laughed lightly, though the sound lacked confidence. Of course. The tension between them felt subtle but undeniable. Vanessa had always enjoyed standing beside a man moving upward. Tonight, for the first time, someone else seemed to occupy the higher ground. Not through money alone. Through presence. Through reputation. Through character. The awards continued. Speeches followed. Champagne flowed. Yet Ryan found himself drifting into memories he had not visited in years. He remembered Evelyn sitting beside him during their earliest investor meetings. He remembered how she encouraged him after setbacks. He remembered promises made during years when success still felt distant. Somewhere along the journey, those memories became inconvenient. Ambition demanded focus. Focus demanded sacrifice. At least that was the justification he repeated to himself. Looking at Evelyn now, he began questioning how many sacrifices had truly been necessary. The ballroom doors opened briefly as additional guests arrived late. A cold breeze slipped through the entrance before disappearing again. Ryan glanced toward the windows overlooking Chicago's skyline. The city lights stretched endlessly into the darkness. Beautiful. Impressive. Yet strangely empty compared to the warmth he now observed across the room. Then the host returned to the stage for a special recognition segment. Tonight, she announced, We would like to acknowledge two individuals whose leadership continues to shape industries across the globe. Cameras immediately turned toward Alexander Reed and Evelyn Carter. Applause erupted throughout the ballroom. Not because they were wealthy, not because they were famous, because people genuinely admired them. Ryan felt something shift inside his chest. The feeling was difficult to define. It was not jealousy. Alexander's achievements were beyond comparison. It was not anger. Evelyn had done nothing wrong. The closest word was realization. A painful realization that success alone had never been the finish line he imagined. While he spent years accumulating accomplishments, Evelyn had accumulated something far more valuable. A life. A meaningful one. The applause continued as Alexander and Evelyn stood briefly to acknowledge the recognition. They exchanged a glance before sitting again. Nothing dramatic. Nothing theatrical. Just two people entirely secure in who they were. Ryan noticed that detail more than anything else. Security, peace, contentment, qualities impossible to fake. For the first time all evening, he stopped wondering how successful Evelyn had become. The answer was obvious. Instead, he found himself wondering something else. Had she become happier after leaving him? The question lingered long after the applause ended. And deep down, before logic could interfere, Ryan already knew the answer. The remainder of the evening unfolded like a carefully arranged performance, except Ryan Brooks no longer understood his role in it. Hours earlier he arrived believing the gala would celebrate everything he had achieved. Now he sat beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers watching a different story take shape. One he had never anticipated. One he could not control. The host announced another award category while applause echoed through the ballroom. Cameras swept across smiling faces. Elegant music drifted through the air. Yet Ryan barely heard any of it. His attention kept returning to the table position directly ahead of him. Evelyn and Alexander seemed entirely unaffected by the attention surrounding them. They spoke quietly, shared occasional smiles, listened attentively whenever someone approached. Nothing about them felt performative. The realization unsettled Ryan more with every passing minute. Beside him, Vanessa checked her phone repeatedly. The confidence she carried earlier had begun to fade. Several photographers who spent the first half of the evening circling their table now focused elsewhere. Attention had become currency in Vanessa's world. Tonight she was watching its value decline. Then another unexpected moment arrived. During a networking break between presentations, one of the event organizers approached Evelyn's table carrying a folder. The woman smiled warmly before speaking with her. Alexander listened quietly. A few seconds later Evelyn stood. The organizer gestured toward a private reception area reserved for keynote speakers and honorary guests. Ryan watched carefully. "What is that about?" Vanessa asked. Before anyone could answer, a nearby executive leaned toward their table. They invited her to join the advisory council. Ryan frowned. What advisory council? The National Leadership Initiative. The executive seemed surprised Ryan was unfamiliar with it. Only a handful of business leaders receive invitations. Vanessa's eyes widened. Ryan looked back toward Evelyn. The National Leadership Initiative carried enormous influence. Membership opened doors unavailable through ordinary business channels. Invitations were rarely extended and almost never publicly discussed. Yet there she was, quietly being welcomed into a circle many executives spent entire careers trying to enter. Across the ballroom, Evelyn accepted the invitation with polite gratitude. Nothing more. No dramatic reaction. No attempt to attract additional attention. Once again her restraint made the achievement feel even larger. Ryan felt a strange pressure building in his chest. Not jealousy. Not exactly. Something closer to perspective. For years he measured success through numbers. Market value. Revenue growth. Media visibility. Looking around the ballroom now, he began noticing another kind of success. The kind that could not be purchased. The kind earned through reputation. Through integrity. Through years of consistent actions nobody applauded while they were happening. His thoughts drifted backward. 7 years earlier. The final months of the marriage. The arguments. The distance. The long hours spent chasing opportunities while assuming Evelyn would simply remain where he left her. He remembered dismissing concerns because business demanded focus. He remembered convincing himself that personal sacrifices were temporary, necessary. Looking back now, the logic felt disturbingly incomplete. A waiter refreshed the drinks at their table. Vanessa barely noticed. Her attention remained fixed on Evelyn. "I still do not understand," she said quietly. "How does someone disappear and come back like this?" Ryan did not answer, because he was starting to understand. Evelyn had never disappeared. The world simply stopped paying attention. While everyone else focused on public success stories, she built something private, something real, something lasting. The gala continued, moving toward its biggest award of the night. Ryan's category, Entrepreneur of the Year. Earlier he imagined the moment repeatedly, walking onto the stage, accepting the trophy, delivering a speech, enjoying the applause. Now the award felt strangely smaller than before. Not meaningless, just different. The host eventually announced the finalists. Ryan's name appeared on the massive screens. Applause filled the room. Vanessa smiled immediately. Cameras returned to their table. For a brief moment, everything felt familiar again. Then Ryan glanced forward. Evelyn was applauding too. Calmly, sincerely. There was no bitterness in her expression. No resentment. No desire to embarrass him. She simply applauded like everyone else. That simple gesture affected him more than criticism ever could, because it revealed something important. Evelyn had moved beyond the need for revenge. She did not come here to prove him wrong. She came because she belonged here. The distinction changed everything. Moments later the winner was announced. Ryan Brooks. The ballroom erupted into applause. Cameras flashed. Vanessa squeezed his arm excitedly. Ryan stood and made his way toward the stage. The audience rose in recognition. He smiled, accepted congratulations, shook hands. Everything unfolded exactly as expected. Yet while standing beneath the spotlight holding the most prestigious award of his career, his eyes drifted toward the front row, toward Evelyn, toward Alexander, toward the life he never imagined existed beyond the divorce. The applause eventually faded. The room waited for his acceptance speech. Ryan approached the microphone. Thousands of faces looked back at him. Executives, investors, reporters, industry leaders. The words he prepared suddenly felt inadequate, because standing there, surrounded by achievement, he realized something uncomfortable. Success had given him everything he once wanted. Yet somehow the woman he left behind appeared richer in every way that actually mattered. And for the first time since the divorce, Ryan Brooks found himself wondering not what Evelyn had lost when she walked away from him, but what he had lost when he let her go. Ryan Brooks stood beneath the spotlight holding the award that had once occupied his thoughts for months. The trophy felt heavier than expected. Not physically, emotionally. Applause continued across the ballroom while cameras captured every angle. His name echoed through the speakers. Smiles surrounded him. By every measurable standard, this should have been one of the happiest moments of his career. Yet his attention kept drifting toward the front row, toward Evelyn Carter, toward Alexander Reed, toward the life that somehow seemed brighter than the one he spent years constructing. Ryan adjusted his grip on the award and approached the microphone. The audience settled into silence. Thousands of crystal reflections shimmered overhead. The city skyline stretched beyond towering windows. Every eye focused on the stage. He had prepared this speech weeks earlier. Carefully crafted sentences, strategic acknowledgments, memorable closing remarks. Yet standing there now, many of those words felt strangely hollow. He offered thanks to his team, recognized investors, mentioned mentors who supported his journey. The audience applauded politely at expected moments. Everything sounded professional. Everything sounded correct. Yet Ryan sensed the distance between the words and the emotions behind them. Then his gaze accidentally found Evelyn again. She sat listening attentively, calm, respectful, genuine, the same way she once listened years ago when his dreams still existed only on paper. A memory surfaced unexpectedly. A small apartment kitchen. Winter snow outside the window. Evelyn reviewing financial projections while Ryan talked excitedly about future plans. They had almost nothing back then. One aging car. modest furniture, endless uncertainty. Yet somehow those years contained a kind of happiness he had not experienced in a very long time. Ryan finished his speech. The audience applauded warmly. He smiled, thanked everyone once more, then returned to his seat carrying the award. Vanessa greeted him immediately. "You were amazing." Ryan nodded politely. "Thank you." She touched the trophy admiringly. "This is huge." Ryan looked at the polished surface reflecting ballroom lights. "Yes." Yet even he could hear how unconvincing the response sounded. Across the room, Evelyn and Alexander exchanged a quiet conversation. They appeared completely unaffected by his victory. Not dismissive, not impressed, simply comfortable within their own world. That observation lingered with Ryan long after the applause faded. As the evening progressed, guests moved between tables during another networking interval. Conversations filled the ballroom. Business cards changed hands. Partnerships began forming over drinks and introductions. Ryan usually excelled during these moments. Tonight felt different. Several people congratulated him on the award. Yet nearly every conversation eventually shifted toward Alexander Reed or Carter Global Advisory. Ryan listened carefully. Stories emerged from every direction. Investors describing successful collaborations. Entrepreneurs praising Evelyn's mentorship. Executives discussing Alexander's reputation for integrity. The more Ryan heard, the more a pattern became impossible to ignore. Neither of them had earned respect through publicity. They earned it through consistent actions repeated over many years. Near the center of the ballroom, Evelyn was speaking with a young business owner. The conversation looked simple. No cameras. No reporters. Just genuine interest. She listened more than she spoke. Asked questions. Encouraged. Guided. Ryan found himself watching. Not because she demanded attention. Because she did not. The woman standing there barely resembled the version people once pitied after the divorce. She radiated something far more powerful than status. Peace. Across the room, an older investor approached Ryan. "Congratulations on the award." "Thank you." The man smiled politely before glancing toward Evelyn. "You know, she talks about those early company years sometimes." Ryan blinked. "She does." "Not often." The investor nodded. "But whenever she does, she always speaks kindly." Ryan remained silent. The investor continued. "That says a lot about a person." Then he walked away. The words remained behind. "She always speaks kindly." Ryan stared at his untouched drink. 7 years. 7 years of distance. 7 years without bitterness. 7 years during which Evelyn apparently built an entirely new life without carrying resentment publicly. The realization felt both admirable and painful. Because if positions had been reversed, Ryan was not entirely sure he could have done the same. Later that evening, another announcement drew everyone's attention. A charitable foundation affiliated with the Gala revealed a new national initiative supporting young entrepreneurs. Significant funding had already been secured. Major corporate partnerships were in place. Then the lead sponsor appeared on the screen. Carter Global Advisory. The ballroom erupted into applause once again. Ryan slowly exhaled. The company name that once meant nothing to him now seemed everywhere. Yet what struck him most was not the success itself. It was the purpose behind it. Evelyn had transformed achievement into opportunity for others. She had built something larger than personal ambition. The orchestra began playing again while guests returned to their seats. Ryan glanced toward the windows overlooking Chicago. Reflections shimmered across the glass. For years he believed winning meant standing exactly where he stood tonight. Holding awards. Receiving recognition. Commanding attention. Now uncertainty entered that belief for the first time. Because the happiest people in the room were not necessarily the most celebrated. And as he looked toward Evelyn laughing softly beside Alexander, Ryan found himself confronting a difficult truth. The woman he once assumed needed him to succeed had become extraordinary without him. And perhaps the greatest surprise of all was realizing she no longer seemed interested in proving anything to anyone. As the evening moved deeper into the night, the atmosphere inside the ballroom changed in ways no event planner could have predicted. The official schedule continued exactly as written. Awards were presented. Photographs were taken. Speeches were delivered. Yet beneath the polished surface of the gala, an entirely different story had become the center of attention. Ryan Brooks could feel it every time he looked around the room. Conversations that once revolved around quarterly growth and market trends now seemed drawn toward one table, one couple, one unexpected return. From across the ballroom, he watched another group of executives approach Evelyn and Alexander. Some waited patiently for a chance to speak with them. Others simply stopped by to offer greetings before moving on. The pattern repeated itself again and again. What struck Ryan most was not the number of people. It was the sincerity. Nobody appeared interested in gaining something. Nobody seemed eager to impress. The respect felt genuine, earned over time rather than purchased through status. Vanessa noticed it too. Her posture had grown increasingly rigid throughout the evening. Earlier she moved through the ballroom with effortless confidence. Now she seemed distracted. Every time another influential guest approached Evelyn, Vanessa's smile became a little less natural. Every time another camera turned toward Alexander and Evelyn, the discomfort became harder to hide. "I still cannot believe this," she muttered quietly. Ryan glanced toward her. "Believe what?" Vanessa looked directly at Evelyn. "That she became all of this." Ryan followed her gaze. Evelyn was speaking with an elderly woman near the front of the room. The conversation appeared relaxed, comfortable. The woman eventually laughed before placing a hand on Evelyn's shoulder affectionately. Ryan recognized the woman immediately. She chaired one of the most influential foundations in the country. Access to her alone represented years of networking for many executives. Yet she spoke to Evelyn like an old friend. Ryan slowly exhaled. Maybe she always had it in her. Vanessa looked surprised by the answer. Ryan surprised himself too, because for the first time all evening, he was no longer comparing Evelyn's success to his own. He was simply acknowledging it. The realization felt strangely freeing. A few moments later, Alexander stood and excused himself from a conversation. Several guests attempted to stop him for introductions, but he politely declined and walked toward the balcony overlooking the city. The skyline glittered. Beneath the night sky, Chicago stretched endlessly beyond the glass. Evelyn joined him a minute later. Together they stood quietly overlooking the lights below. They did not appear concerned with who was watching. They did not appear interested in maintaining appearances. They simply seemed happy. Ryan watched from across the room. 7 years ago he believed happiness would arrive after the next milestone. Then the next one. Then the next one. There was always another target. Another objective. Another achievement waiting ahead. Looking at Evelyn now, he wondered whether happiness had been available much earlier. Whether he simply failed to recognize it when it stood beside him. The host announced another segment of the evening, drawing attention back toward the stage. Guests gradually returned to their seats. Alexander and Evelyn followed a few moments later. As they crossed the ballroom, something remarkable happened. The room seemed to part naturally around them. Not because anyone was instructed to move. Because people wanted to greet them. A handshake here. A smile there. A brief conversation. The effect was subtle but undeniable. Ryan noticed several executives he had spent years trying to impress waiting patiently for a few moments of Alexander's attention. Others spoke warmly with Evelyn about projects, partnerships, and charitable initiatives. No one treated them like celebrities. They treated them like leaders. The distinction mattered. When Alexander and Evelyn finally returned to their table, the spotlight from the stage briefly swept across the audience. For a single moment it illuminated them both. Evelyn smiled at something Alexander whispered. He smiled back. The exchange lasted only seconds. Yet Ryan felt the weight of it immediately. There had once been a time when he believed success would make him the most important person in every room. Tonight taught him something different. The most important people were often the ones who no longer needed to prove their importance. Around them conversations resumed. Music drifted softly through the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers reflected hundreds of points of light across polished marble floors. The gala continued exactly as planned. Yet everyone could feel it. The center of gravity had shifted. Not because Evelyn demanded attention. Not because Alexander sought recognition. But because true confidence carried its own light. And as Ryan sat quietly watching the woman he once underestimated walk effortlessly through a room filled with power and influence, he finally understood what every other person in the ballroom had already realized. Evelyn Carter had not returned to reclaim the spotlight. She had become the kind of woman who carried it with her wherever she went. The gala should have been winding down by now. Awards had been presented. Speeches had been delivered. The formal schedule was nearly complete. Yet nobody seemed interested in leaving. Conversations continued beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers, while cameras remained active long after they normally would have been packed away. Something about the evening felt unfinished. Ryan Brooks sat quietly at his table, no longer pretending that the night belonged to him. Earlier he had been the center of attention. Now he felt more like an observer watching a story unfold from the outside. Across the ballroom, Evelyn Carter and Alexander Reed remained surrounded by guests. Not because they sought attention, because people genuinely enjoyed being around them. The distinction became impossible to ignore. One conversation ended only for another to begin. Investors greeted them. Philanthropists greeted them. Industry leaders greeted them. Yet despite the endless introductions, neither Evelyn nor Alexander appeared exhausted by it. They listened carefully, remembered names, asked thoughtful questions. Small details. Human details. The kind Ryan realized he had overlooked for years while focusing on bigger goals. Then the final surprise of the evening arrived. The event chairman stepped onto the stage and requested everyone's attention. Conversations gradually quieted. Glasses settled onto tables. Guests turned toward the podium. Before we conclude tonight's celebration, the chairman announced, there is one additional recognition we would like to share. A large screen illuminated behind him. Images began appearing across the display. Major charitable projects, educational initiatives, entrepreneurial development programs, international partnerships. The audience watched attentively. Then a familiar logo appeared. Carter Global Advisory. Ryan immediately sat forward. Around the room, whispers began spreading once again. The chairman smiled. Many of you know the extraordinary work being done through these programs. What fewer people realize is the scale of their impact. Statistics appeared on the screen. Thousands of scholarships funded. Hundreds of businesses launched. Communities supported across multiple states. Mentorship initiatives reaching young entrepreneurs nationwide. The numbers were impressive. Yet what happened next surprised even the people already familiar with Evelyn's accomplishments. Another slide appeared. This one displayed the names of principal funding partners. Several major corporations appeared first. Then one final name occupied the center of the screen. Reed Global Holdings. The audience immediately reacted. Ryan glanced toward Alexander. The man remained calm, almost uncomfortable with the attention. The chairman continued speaking. Together, Alexander Reed and Evelyn Carter have quietly funded initiatives that have changed countless lives over the last several years. More photographs appeared. Students receiving scholarships. Small business owners opening storefronts. Community centers celebrating new programs. Real people. Real outcomes. The ballroom erupted into applause. Not polite applause. Not professional applause. Genuine appreciation. Ryan felt something settle inside him. For most of the evening he had been trying to understand how Evelyn became so admired. Now he finally saw the answer clearly. Her success was never about wealth. It was about what she did with it. Beside him, Vanessa stared silently at the screen. Earlier she measured the night through appearances, through status, through attention. The presentation revealed something entirely different. Influence built through service. Respect earned through action. Across the room, guests rose to their feet. The applause grew louder. Several people stood. Then, more followed. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was standing. A standing ovation. Not for an award. Not for a business deal. For a legacy. Evelyn looked genuinely surprised. Alexander smiled softly beside her. For a moment neither moved. Then they stood together and acknowledged the room. No dramatic gestures. No lengthy speech. Just gratitude. Ryan joined the applause. Slowly at first. Then fully. Because resisting the truth no longer served any purpose. He watched Evelyn standing beneath the ballroom lights. 7 years earlier he believed she was walking away from opportunity, walking away from success, walking away from the future. The reality had been exactly the opposite. She had been walking toward it. The chairman invited them to the stage. The audience applauded once more as they made their way forward. Alexander allowed Evelyn to step ahead first. Another small detail. Another quiet act of respect. Standing beneath the spotlight, Evelyn accepted the recognition with remarkable simplicity. "Success means very little if it only benefits one person," she said. Her voice carried clearly through the ballroom. The greatest opportunities in life come from helping others discover what they are capable of becoming. The room fell silent. Every word felt sincere. Every word felt earned. Ryan listened carefully. Not because she was speaking from a stage. Because she was speaking from experience. When the applause returned, it seemed even louder than before. And as Evelyn stepped away from the microphone beside the man who valued her, respected her, and celebrated her accomplishments without needing to compete with them, Ryan finally understood the truth that had been unfolding all evening. The greatest loss of his life was never the marriage itself. It was failing to recognize the extraordinary woman standing beside him until she was no longer his to lose. The standing ovation seemed to last forever. Applause echoed through the ballroom while hundreds of guests remained on their feet. Crystal chandeliers reflected waves of golden light across the room. Cameras captured every moment. Yet the most remarkable part of the evening was not the recognition itself. It was the expression on Evelyn Carter's face. She looked grateful, humble, calm, as though none of this had ever been about proving anything. When the applause finally faded, guests slowly returned to their seats. Conversations resumed. Music drifted softly through the ballroom once again. The formal portion of the gala had ended, but very few people seemed eager to leave. Across the room, people continued approaching Evelyn and Alexander. Some wanted introductions. Others simply wanted to thank them for work they had done years earlier. Ryan Brooks watched quietly from his table. For the first time all evening, he no longer felt confused. The pieces finally fit together. The success, the respect, the influence, the admiration. None of it had appeared suddenly. None of it had been handed to her. Evelyn had built it step by step while the rest of the world was not paying attention. 7 years ago he believed the divorce marked the end of her story. Tonight he realized it had only been the beginning. Vanessa sat silently beside him. The excitement that filled her earlier had disappeared entirely. Neither of them seemed interested in discussing what had happened. There was nothing left to debate. Reality had spoken clearly enough. Across the ballroom, Alexander excused himself briefly to greet several international investors preparing to leave. For the first time that evening, Evelyn stood alone near one of the large windows overlooking Chicago. The city stretched beneath the night sky in a sea of lights. Ryan hesitated. Then he stood. He did not fully know why. Perhaps because some conversations should not remain unfinished forever. He crossed the ballroom slowly. Guests moved around him. Laughter echoed in the distance. Music floated softly through the room. By the time he reached the window, Evelyn had already noticed him approaching. She offered a polite smile. "Congratulations on the award." Her voice carried the same calm sincerity she displayed all evening. Ryan almost laughed. After everything that had happened, she was still congratulating him. "Thank you," he replied. For a moment neither spoke. The silence felt strange but not uncomfortable. Just honest. Ryan looked toward the city lights. "You look happy." Evelyn smiled softly. "I am." The answer contained no hesitation. No performance. No attempt to impress him. Just truth. Somehow that made it even more powerful. Ryan nodded slowly. "I can see that." Another quiet pause settled between them. Then Ryan finally said the thing he had been carrying all evening. "I underestimated you." Evelyn looked at him for a moment. Not angrily. Not triumphantly. Simply thoughtfully. "Maybe," she said gently. "But I spent a long time underestimating myself too." The honesty surprised him. Ryan lowered his eyes briefly. "I thought I understood what success looked like." Evelyn followed his gaze toward the skyline. "Most people do." The city lights reflected in the glass before them. Endless buildings. Endless motion. Endless ambition. Ryan smiled faintly. Turns out I was wrong about a lot of things. Evelyn did not rush to answer. She never had. One of the things he once admired most about her was her ability to sit with silence instead of filling it unnecessarily. Finally she spoke. We all are sometimes. There was no accusation in her voice. No bitterness. No desire to revisit old wounds. Just acceptance. The kind that comes from making peace with the past instead of fighting it forever. Ryan looked at her. Really looked at her. Not as his former wife. Not as someone he once knew. But as the woman standing before him now. Stronger. Wiser. Entirely her own person. I am glad things worked out for you, he said quietly. Evelyn smiled. Thank you. And for the first time all evening, Ryan understood that he truly meant it. Across the ballroom, Alexander began walking back toward them. His expression remained warm and relaxed. The moment Ryan saw him approaching, another realization settled into place. Alexander was not remarkable because of his wealth. Plenty of wealthy people filled the room. He was remarkable because he saw Evelyn clearly. He valued her strengths, respected her voice, celebrated her success without feeling threatened by it. Ryan extended his hand as Alexander reached them. Alexander accepted it immediately. Congratulations on your award, he said. Ryan nodded. Thank you. Then, after a brief pause, he added something he had not planned to say. Take good care of her. Alexander glanced toward Evelyn before smiling. I intend to. The answer was simple. Certain. Unshakable. Ryan felt something inside him finally release. Not regret. Regret would always remain. Something else. Acceptance. The understanding that some chapters do not reopen. They simply teach lessons before ending. A few minutes later, guests began departing in earnest. Limousines lined the street outside. The ballroom slowly emptied. Ryan watched from the entrance as Alexander offered his arm to Evelyn. Together they stepped into the cool Chicago night. Cameras flashed one final time. Yet neither seemed interested in the attention. They simply walked toward their car. Side by side. Partners. Equal in every way that mattered. The vehicle disappeared into the city lights moments later. Ryan remained standing beneath the glow of the entrance for a while longer. Then he looked back toward the now empty ballroom. The award still rested in his hands. It remained an extraordinary achievement. But tonight had taught him something far more valuable. The greatest revenge was never humiliation. The greatest revenge was growth. Evelyn had not returned to make him feel small. She had returned as living proof that losing her was the biggest mistake he ever made. And the most remarkable part was that she no longer needed him to understand it. She had already won the moment she learned her worth.